2 steps over is all you gotta remember. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's a zero.
But what if it lands on a zero though?
So what if it does? What's the problem with that?
Like, so it'd be like 0 and then whatever number was after that?
What do you mean, what if it lands on a zero? Give me a number that you're talking about. I mean, make up one that would land on a zero. You just move it, that's all.
I know, but like, what if it's like a different number that like, what if it's like?
It doesn't matter what the number is.
It does matter, cause if it lands on a zero, then like, how do you know what's after that? Or is it just like, if it has like 2 zeros and then the 1/4 instead of the 4? You just put 1/4%? Or is that just like too weird of a question?
I don't, if you can say the number, tell me and I'll write it. Write it, and then I'll show you.
Instead of a 4, you just put 2 zeros right there, or like, oh, never mind.
If I have 0, 0, 0.
And then 1/4, yeah.
And a 4, and then a 4th, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, okay, something like that, yeah.
Doesn't matter, you move it over 2 places and it would be 0.04 and a 4th.
Okay.
2 places, no matter what, 2 places. You wouldn't have anything like that. Typically, they wouldn't have a 4th there, because a 4th as a decimal is a quarter, 0.25.
I'm just saying, cause sometimes it shows like the standard way of having
It's always no exceptions.
doing things.
There's
but
no
then, like,
exceptions.
they throw you like a weird problem like
There's
that.
no exceptions, that's what I keep telling you though, there's no exceptions.
All right.
2 places, that's it.
Okay.
There's no if, this, then that. 2 places, that's all. Okay? All right. Let's look at exercise 3 on page 152 as an example. There are all different ones here. They want to change each decimal to a percent, and anytime, here's one way that you can remember. See, when you are studying and learning, you have to find a way, something that you'll always remember. If I want to go from a decimal to a percent, here's what I always remember. That 1 equals 100%, right? I knew I had to go 2 that way to get 100 out of 1. So I don't have to memorize, go to the right to move a decimal to a percent, go to the left to move back. All I remember is 1 whole equals 100%. So I know that I had to move the decimal point 2 places this way to change this to that. You see what I'm saying? And if I want to go from a percent back to a decimal, I say 100% equals 1. I know to change 100 to 1, I had to go back 2.
So if it's another number?
Doesn't matter what the number is.
Just do it 2 steps?
The same thing, always. So when I look at this exercise here, and it wants me to change a decimal to a percent, I know I'm going 2 places to the right. So I just go on. Decimal point 81 would be what percent? 81%, right? 2 places to the right in your book, number 1. Going on across, 37.5%, 37.5 would be what? 37.5%, 2 places to the right. 0.5 would be 50%, 2 places to the right. 0.004 would be what it would be? Is it 4? 0.4%. 0.4%, 2 places. Because you have a whole percent, you can have a fraction of a percent, not even 1 whole. It's only 4/10 of 1. That means they've taken that 1 and divided it into 10 pieces, and they only have 4 of those. You see what I'm saying? Not even a whole. Everything can be broken down smaller, 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 smaller. We just don't usually deal with those small numbers. But anything can be broken out. So you can have 1/10 of a percent. You can have 1/2 of a percent. People think 1/2 of a percent is 50. No. 50% is half of a whole. You can have half of 1. And that's just 0.5%, 0.5%, or 0.5%. I can have 0.5% or 0.5%. That means it's not even 1. It's not even a penny. It's half of a penny.
Do you get 37.5 whenever it keeps repeating?
37.5 really wouldn't repeat because 1/2 would be 0.5. So they could have put 37.5%, but it didn't end at 37. That's how you got the 0.5 or a half.
So,
It
but
didn't
then
end
they
at
turn it
37.
into like a mixed number?
They can turn it into a decimal or a fraction. Because everything's not gonna end right on a whole, right? So it doesn't have to be repeating though. It could end, but it may not end at the whole number. It doesn't end until, like this one. If I want to change that, to change a fraction into a percent, you first change the fraction into a decimal by dividing the denominator into the numerator. See, it didn't end at the hundredths, but it did end at the thousands. If I wanted to change this decimal now into a percent, I move it over 2 places. And that's how we get a 12.5%.
So that's the kind of percentages you do like when it comes to like buying cars?
Yeah, that's it. Cars, houses, anything. They charge a percent interest when you get interest and when you pay interest. If you have a checking account or a savings account, sometimes they pay you interest. And that's how you figure it out.
So you get your total price of your car and then you just divide it by whatever percentage they give
You
you.
multiply it by,
Okay, yeah, of course, sorry.
because you're gonna pay that much, that many times, and then you multiply that by how many years, and we'll talk about interest as we get through percent. That's part of percent is interest. Interest is so much percent of the money times how many years you're gonna take to pay it back. So if it comes to $1,000 interest, it's $1,000 for 5 years, that's $5,000 you're paying just in interest. So we'll talk about that, but yes, that's what it's mostly talking. The most of the time that we use percent is when we're talking about transactions like that. Okay, but that's how you could get a 12.5. Sometimes you have numbers that won't end at all. To change this, a third, into a percent. So anytime you change a fraction into a percent, first change it into a decimal by dividing the bottom into the top. And I can see no matter how far I go, that's not going to end. It's going to keep being a 3. I'm not going to keep putting 3, 3, 3. So we usually stop it, since we only need hundredths for percent. We stop it at the hundredths, but we can't just throw this one away. We have to make that into a fraction. That's how they get that. And then to change that into a percent, you still have to move it over 2 places. So you'll have 33 1/3% is a third. That's how they get that. 33 1/3 is a third of 100. Because if I add 33 1/3 together 3 times, that's one of them. 2 of them. When I say a third, that means it's broken into 3 pieces just the same, right? And if I break 100 into 3 pieces just the same, each of them would have to be this. 1/3 plus 1/3 is 2/3, right? Plus another third is 3/3. And what's 3/3? A whole. Now I have 3, 6, 9, 10. 3, 6, 9, 10. There's your 100. So 1/3 of 100 is 33 1/3. It's not just 33. If I only had 33 in each one of them, that only add up to 99. If you want to divide it all the way up, you'd have to divide it into 33 1/3. No, that's 3/3 make a whole.
Oh, that's cool. I just like, I've
I know.
never seen it like that.
I know, yes, I want to get your mind thinking like that. When you're talking about dividing equally, has to be the exact same in each part. 1/3 means there are 3 parts to that whole, and each part has the same amount in it. And if I tell you that that whole is 100, you got to use that whole 100 up. You couldn't use that 100 up using whole numbers.
How did you have the 1/3 on the side again?
Add them, you add them, how do you add 1/3 and 1/3 plus another third is
Right
what?
there, I can't really see the
What's
bottom.
1/3
Next
plus,
to the 100,
this
I
is
can't see.
nothing, this is something that didn't get erased. 1/3 and another third is how many thirds? If you have 1/3 and I give you another third, how many thirds do you have? And if I give you another third, how many will you have? And 3/3 make what? A whole. And if I carry it over to the whole. And a whole plus 3 is 4, plus 3 is 7, plus 3 is 10. 4, 7, 10. So that's how I get my 100. Okay? All right.
So you could do that with like 25%, like, cause it would be like 25.14%? Is that what it would be?
If I did what?
25.14%? Would that be kinda like a fourth? Or, I don't know.
25 1/4%.
Yeah, that would be.
And what do you want trying to do with it?
Would that be the same thing if you added it up, just like it would equal up to the whole, just like that?
No. This says that it's 25 1/4 out of 100. The other was 100 in the whole. It's 100 in the whole here, I gotta have 25. This is not the same question as we asked before. This says we have 25 1/4 out of 100. It's divided into 100 pieces. That's not the same thing. I'm not saying that this is, before I said 1/3 of 100. What do I have 3 of in 100? This tells me I have 25 1/4 out of 100.